So that dreaded check engine light popped on, huh? And your scanner's throwing out a P1138. I know, it's a frustrating little mystery. But hey, don't worry, we're gonna solve this thing together, step by step.
And you know, that specific code, P1138, it can feel super frustrating. But here's the thing, it's not just some random error. It's actually a clue, a really good one, that points us right to a specific system in your engine.
So, let's just approach this like a detective, logically. By the time we're done here, you're going to understand exactly what this code means, what's causing it, and most importantly, how you can get it fixed.
All right, first things first, let's decode what your car is actually trying to tell you with this specific code. Okay, so what is a P1138? In simple terms, your car's computer has spotted a performance problem with something called the swirl control valve. Now that's the what, but to really get a handle on this, we've got to know why it's happening.
So what's really going on under the hood? See, this code isn't just random. It usually gets triggered during a very, very specific moment when you're driving.
Yeah, I want you to picture this. You're cruising along on the highway, everything's smooth, and then you take an exit ramp and start slowing down to a stop. It's right there, in that moment, that transition from a steady speed back to idle, that your car's computer, the PCM, decides to run a little check. And that's when it flags the problem.
When you boil it all down, the problem is actually pretty simple. Think of it like this. The computer tells the swirl control valve, hey, I need you to be in this exact position. But when it double checks, a sensor reports back, nope, it's over here. It's that mismatch, that little argument between what's expected and what's actually happening that triggers the P1138 code. All right, so we know what's happening. Now it's time to figure out who, or, well, what, is responsible. For a P1138 code, we've basically got three main suspects on our list to investigate.
Yeah, the cause usually boils down to one of three things. It could be an electrical issue, a physical problem with the valve itself, or a communication breakdown with the car's brain. So let's dive in and start investigating our first suspect.
Okay, time to roll up our sleeves, let's get into the investigation and look at each of these three suspects one by one.
So, suspect number one. And honestly, this is often the most common culprit, an issue with the electrical pathway that's supposed to be controlling the valve.
And this is a really crucial point. The valve itself, it might be totally fine. The real problem could be the wiring that leads to it. You could have a broken wire, a frayed one, or maybe a connector is just a little loose, and boom, that's enough to interrupt the signal from the computer.
Luckily, the fix here is pretty straightforward. What you're going to want to do is carefully trace the wiring harness that goes to the swirl control valve. Just look for any obvious signs of trouble, damage, any green gunk or corrosion on the connectors, or even just a loose plug. Your first step is to repair or replace any of that damaged wiring.
Okay, so let's say the wiring looks good. Now we move on to our second suspect, the valve itself.
Over time, engine parts can just they get gummed up with dirt, oil, carbon buildup, all that stuff. And all that gunk can physically stop the valve from moving where the computer wants it to go. Or sometimes the part has just had a long life and it's worn out and failed.
So the solution here is to get your eyes directly on the part. You'll need to find the swirl control valve on your engine. Take a good look. Is it caked in grime? Does it look cracked or broken in any way? If it's obviously contaminated or damaged, yeah, replacing it is going to be your best bet.
All right, so the wiring is good, the valve looks clean. What's left? Well, there's one more place to look, and it's the brain of the whole operation.
And that brings us to suspect number 3, a loose link at the powertrain control module, or what we call the PCM. The PCM is your car's main computer. And look, if the plug going into the PCM is loose, it really doesn't matter how perfect the rest of the system is. The communication is broken right at the source.
And you know what? The fix here can be surprisingly simple. All you have to do is find your car's PCM and just carefully look at those big electrical connectors plugged into it. You're just making sure they're pushed in all the way and clicked in securely. It's not uncommon for road vibrations to just kind of work them loose over time.
But listen, this is a really important distinction to make. A poor connection is one thing. That's usually an easy fix. A failed PCM, though, that's a whole other, more serious issue. And thankfully, it's a lot rarer. So if you've gone through and checked all three of our suspects, and that darn code is still there, that's your cue. It's time to pause and think about calling in a pro.
And that actually brings us perfectly to our final and maybe most critical step.
knowing your limits with a DIY diagnosis, and recognizing when it's time to hand the keys over to a professional.
Yeah, this quote really says it all. Look, while you can absolutely investigate the most common causes yourself, and you should, properly diagnosing really complex electrical systems or a potential PCM failure, well, that takes specialized tools and a ton of experience.
But think about it. By following these steps, you're not just walking into the shop saying, my check engine light is on. No way. You can walk in there and confidently say, hey, I'm getting a P1138 code. I've already checked the wiring to the swirl control valve, I've inspected the valve itself, and I made sure the PCM connection is secure. See the difference? You're now an informed car owner, totally ready to get your Nissan running smoothly again.